The duck fixed its gaze on her like it held a secret she couldn't grasp. Probably did too. Just as Lisa lifted her phone to snap a photo of me tossing feed to the ducks, ranting about HOA rules and a DULA 500 fine, one of them unleashed the loudest, most defiant quack I'd ever heard and dropped a perfectly timed mess right on her fancy sandals. Her face twisted into a mix of courtroom outrage and a kid biting into a sour lemon. Me? I just grinned. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just feeding ducks, I was running a federally mandated wetland behavior or study. I wasn't just her neighbor. I'm a wildlife officer. She'd picked the worst possible duck feeding battle to wage. It all kicked off on a typical Saturday morning. The sun was shining, the air crisp, and I just grabbed a scoop of specialty duck feed high-protein pellets from a conservation supplier. No junk like breadcrumbs. A little group of mallards had settled in near the reeds at the edge of my yard, which technically borders a protected wetland easement. I know that because it's my job to protect it. But in this neighborhood, common sense dries up faster than a puddle in Vegas. So there I was, tossing pellets and scribbling notes in my waterproof pad, when I heard it, the sharp clack of entitled heels on stone pavers. She stormed through the grass like she owned the planet, her clipboard swinging like a battle axe. She had an HOA badge pinned to her shirt like it made her a cop zero authority, all attitude. Excuse me, that's a blatant violation of HOA policy 4C27. No feeding wildlife on community grounds, she barked. I turned puzzled but calm. Actually, this part's private property that borders. She cut me off with a hand in the air like she was directing traffic. Doesn't matter. We voted last quarter feeding ducks brings aggression, droppings, and disease. It's a DULA 500 fine, and I'm writing it up now. I glanced at the ducks who were waddling off from the human megaphone in khakis. One quacked softly, almost like an apology for her. I wanted to quack back, but I had bigger fish to fry. Or ducks, I guess. Mind showing me that rule? I asked, keeping it cool. She huffed. It's in the binder. I don't have to show you. You'll get the notice in the mail. Right, I said, but you should know I'm not just feeding them. I'm conducting a federally authorized wildlife survey under the North American Wetland Conservation Act. Maybe take a second to think about that. She laughed, a grating blender meets nails kind of laugh. Oh please. Don't get clever with me. What, you saw a nature special and now you're some park ranger? That's when I reached into my pouch, pulled out my laminated ID, and held it up. Her smirk vanished like snow in a heat wave. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I said. I'm the regional officer for this marsh. What you just did could be obstruction of a federal survey. Sure you want to find me? She blinked, then tried to recover. Well, that wetland's still under community rules and— No, I interrupted. It's protected by federal law. Your HOA has no say here. In fact, if your no-feeding rule stops people from supporting protected species, you might be liable for harming migratory wildlife like these ducks. She stared at them like they'd stabbed her in the back. One let out a smug honk. You're making this up, she snapped. I smiled. Want me to call my boss? Or we could do it your way, send the fine, I'll attach it to my federal report, and we'll see how an HOA investigation goes. For the first time in her clipboard-swinging life, Lisa paused. Her eyes flickered like a bad internet connection. Without a word, she spun around and marched off, shoes squishing as she headed for her SUV. The ducks waddled back, unbothered. I figured that was the end of it, but people like Lisa don't back down, they double down. By the time I got back from my afternoon patrol, 4 flyers were plastered around the neighborhood. Big red letters. Do not feed the ducks. DULA 500 HO fine. Report violators. She'd even listed a snitch line that hilariously rang straight to her phone. Next morning, a kid got caught tossing Cheerios into the reeds and came home crying after the mean lady yelled about duck jail. An old guy who'd fed the birds for years found a warning taped to his garage. Lisa was in her element, binoculars out, scanning yards like a hawk with a grudge. She declared war on the ducks and by accident on me. I didn't need petty revenge. I had the law, the facts, and a flock of ticked-off ducks on my side. The next day, I opened a file on my desk, breeding patterns, migratory tags, drone footage from last spring's nesting. Lisa hadn't just crossed a legal line, and it was about to snap back harder than a goose defending its nest. Her flyers hit every mailbox, turning the ducks into the neighborhood's top VY lanes. She claimed they spread disease, lured aggressive geese, and trashed property values, even citing a fake study from a made-up college about a VY and HOA decay. It'd be funny if it weren't so wrong. Some neighbors stopped feeding the birds out of fear. Others snuck crumbs at dusk. One guy got caught on Lisa's doorbell cam tossing grain behind a bush. She posted it to the HOA Facebook group with bird accomplice caught red-handed. I tried to let it fizzle out, but when she had a neighbor's garden fountain yanked for encouraging ducks, I knew this wasn't just HOA nonsense, it was ecosystem sabotage wrapped in self-righteousness. So I opened a case. I pulled aerial shots showing the wetlands borders, survey data, and records proving the mallards were protected migratory species. I noted Lisa's beautification project had trash nests in a federal buffer zone. Hello, Migratory Bird Treaty Act violation. While I built the file, she was out harassing residents, offering a teen doula 10 to film me feeding ducks. He told her to shove it, but she kept going, levying flyers claiming I was under federal review for illegal duck feeding. The irony was thicker than swamp mud. I called in a favor from my colleague, Sarah, a sharp field biologist and enforcement pro. She swung by for a low-key wetland inspection. Lisa spotted her from across the street and, mistaking her for a landscaper, bolted over. "Are you here about the ducks?" "I've got proof." Thorough ICIS. Sarah flashed a steel-edged smile. "Actually, I'm with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, assessing habitat disruption." Lisa froze. "Wait, you're with what?" Sarah flipped out her badge. "We've had reports of interference with migratory nesting, especially where vegetation was removed." Lisa stammered. "That was HOA-approved landscaping." "That landscaping," Sarah said, "was nesting cover for protected species. You may have disturbed an active site." Lisa stood there stunned as Sarah jotted notes and walked off. That night, Lisa went quiet on the no rants, no screenshots. But 2 days later I woke up to breadcrumbs strewn across my yard. Moldy bread, not the duck style. My security cam caught her sneaking around at 1:37 a.m., dumping it like a guilty raccoon. I sent the footage to Sarah, who passed it to enforcement. Lisa had just stepped into federal obstruction territory. Then she called the sheriff, claiming I was baiting wildlife and causing a health crisis. A deputy showed up, apologized for the hassle, watched the video and laughed. "She's gonna flip when she realizes who you are," he said. "Think she already has," I replied. Next evening, I caught her in the reeds with a rake, jabbing at something. She'd stuck anti-bird spikes on a post. One had stabbed a Canada goose's foot. The bird limped off bleeding as she muttered about invasive pests. I didn't argue, just called it in. She'd hurt a protected species. This was federal now. Word spread fast. The neighborhood chat exploded with pics of the injured goose. Even Lisa's allies started bailing. But she didn't quit. She called an emergency HOA meeting. Flyer. 7 p.m. Clubhouse. Topic: Unauthorized activity endangering safety. No mention of ducks or her spikes done, just vague threats aimed at me. I almost skipped it, but curiosity won. She stood at the front in a too-tight suit, cookies stale on a table, and launched into a speech about safety and order, dodging all facts. Then she dropped it. A vote to boot me from the HOA board for disregarding policy and causing wildlife injury. Someone muttered, "Didn't you do that?" She ignored it. I stood, pulled out a folder, me permit, photos of her nest trashing, the bread dumping still, Sarah's report, and the law she'd broken. "Everything I've done is legal," I said. "Everything she's done isn't." Lisa laughed nervously. "Are we trusting a duck feeder over the HOA president?" Right then, Sarah walked in, uniform on, holding a subpoena for HOA records and Lisa's fake sheriff call. The room went dead silent. Lisa stormed out, chair clattering. The meeting turned into a rebellion. Neighbors shared their own Lisa horror stories. They voted me back on the board, unanimous. Next morning, a gift bag sat in my driveway, smashed duck figurines, a snarky "I love nature" mug, and a note. "You think you've won, but the HOA never forgets." I smirked and checked my email. The U.S. Attorney's Office had opened a formal case against her. Environmental violations, harassment, falsified docs. The ducks swam on peaceful. One waddled up and nodded at me. It wasn't over, but Lisa had lost the pond and the war.